It was a Tuesday morning, just like any other, when Austin Caldwell cracked open his cereal box and spooned out a bowl of flakes. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, the radio softly playing an old country tune, and his mind already drifted toward the long shift ahead at the auto parts store. Part-time community college classes, mostly evenings, meant he was always running a little late, a little tired. But today was quiet, ordinary, and just fine. That changed with the fourth ring of the phone. Unknown numbers usually meant debt collectors or telemarketers, and he had all he needed without a third-party pitch. So he stared at the display, milk-stained, spoon poised in midair, ready to ignore, until something made him answer. "This is Austin Caldwell." There was a practiced calm in the voice on the other end, not the gruff or harsh tone of a collector. "Is this Mr. Caldwell?" The voice asked politely. "Yes. My name is Margaret Stevens," said the voice, clearly professional. "I'm calling from Stevens Bradley and Associates regarding the estate of Eleanor Caldwell. I believe she was your grandmother." The spoon clattered into the bowl, milk sloshing over the edge. His heart skipped. "Grandma Eleanor? She passed away months ago." The funeral, I wasn't there." Silence. Then steady words. "Yes, that's what we wanted to discuss. There are matters concerning her. Will that require your immediate attention?" He fumbled for words. I think there's been a mistake. My parents told me I wasn't included in her will. They said everything went to them and my brother." A soft pause, then Miss Stevens said, "Mr. Caldwell, I think you definitely need to meet." Her tone was gentle but firm. "This afternoon?" He stared at his cereal, milk now lukewarm. Everything changed on the wings of that unexpected call, no warning, no preparation. The rest of his day, his life, would pivot on what came next. I sat across from Margaret Stevens in her polished office, the leather chair too stiff, the room too quiet. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain she could hear it. Light filtered through the blinds atop the mahogany desk, illuminating the folder she'd slid toward me. Inside, the truth I'd been told didn't exist. "Your grandmother," she began, her voice gentle, "left you $2.1 million, her house, and multiple investment accounts." She didn't pause. "You were completely omitted from the funeral at my parents' insistence, but you are in her will." A hollow ache opened in my chest. As a kid, I thought the silence around Grandma Eleanor meant nothing. Now it hit me for what it truly was. Erasure. Margaret continued. "I reviewed the probate documents and trust statements. Between cash assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, your inheritance is substantial." I closed my eyes. Staring back at me were numbers, literal life changers, typed across crisp white pages. A $2.1 million total. The deed to a sprawling house with a manicured garden. Accounts configured to grow on their own. "It can't be right," I whispered. "My parents told me I was adopted, unwanted, unworthy. That Grandma loved them, not me. And they repeated it so often, so convincingly, I believed it." She nodded compassionately. "You're understandably shocked. But the will is clear. Your parents were left nothing. Your siblings got $5,000 each." My breath caught. $5,000? Margaret clicked through the account summaries. "Yes. Your siblings, Logan and Ashley, received exactly $5,000 apiece. Your parents, none. Every other asset is yours." Everything, my assumptions, their lies, my place in the world, crumbled. The table felt flimsy beneath my trembling hands. She closed the folder, offering a tissue. "You have every right to feel overwhelmed," she said softly. "But I'll walk you through every document, every account. The estate was carefully structured to secure your future." I stared at her, half hopeful, half terrified. $2 million. A real alma. Proof that I existed. They never taught me to hope for more than survival. But suddenly, this was more. Far more. And as I held those papers, time felt both stopped and propelled forward, toward a future I never thought I'd touch. The office felt colder now, its quiet amplified by the weight of the file Margaret had closed. She rose, walked around the desk, and handed me a single sealed envelope. My name was handwritten in elegant, looping script, Austin Caldwell. Beneath it, a return address in Grandma Eleanor's familiar handwriting. "My grandmother really wanted you to have this," Margaret said softly. My hand trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, a folded letter, the paper still crisp after all these years, bore a salutation that made my heart ache. "My dear Austin, Grandma Eleanor." I sank back into the chair, breath caught. With hands shaking, I unfolded the pages. She wrote of love, unconditional, unwavering, and of truths withheld. Most striking of all, I was her biological grandson, the child of her beloved daughter, Jennifer, who'd passed when I was 2. The adoption story? A cruel fabrication by my parents. The words on the page hit me like cold water. The simplicity of that phrase, "my biological grandson," struck with shocking clarity. Every memory, every moment I'd spent believing I was unwanted, fell away. In its place, the hard, bright light of truth, margin notes and affectionate annotations made her presence feel close, as though she were sitting beside me. Her penmanship, warm and precise, matched the tone. She had written the letter to explain everything: why I had missed her funeral, why she had fought so hard for me, and why she had carefully arranged her estate so it would land in my hands, not my parents. From the corner of the letter, one phrase echoed in my mind. Because the lies your parents have told you are cruel and completely false. You are not adopted. Each sentence, each carefully chosen word stripped me of the identity I had been forced to live. I thought of the countless nights I had tried to fit into a picture that no longer existed. She further explained her decision to document my life in secret, how she hired a detective to monitor my hard labor and simple living, proof of my resilience. And she spelled out the reason for the inheritance: to give me not only security, but the chance to live fully. The letter ended with a personal postscript: the keys to her house were in a safe deposit box, and she hoped I would live there. The words, simple, direct, impossible to ignore, shifted everything. Margaret watched me with quiet compassion. No words were needed. In that moment, the letter became my lifeline. It resolved years of confusion, pain, and absence, replacing them with something I had only dared to imagine: belonging. Real-life echoes. It's not uncommon for grandparents to use personal letters to confirm deep truths and override family falsehoods. One sample letter to grandchildren reads: know that you are loved by me, and are loved, strikingly similar in tone to Eleanor's final message. Reddit threads recount similar inheritance revelations. He died finally in 2023 and left every cent of my dad's estate to her son. It still feels painful. In my case, it wasn't just about money, it was confirmation, clarity, and healing. That letter gave me more than an inheritance. It gave me truth. Grandma Eleanor's letter cut deeper than truth. It revealed a conspiracy rooted in deception and denial. Susan and David hadn't just lied, they'd schemed to erase him. When I was 2, they fabricated a formal adoption, convincing everyone that I was no longer their child. I watched their image of a perfect family tighten around my sister and brother, but never me. But Eleanor had known. She had fought on my behalf. Despite my parents' efforts to isolate me, she refused to let me disappear. The letter confessed she had hired a private investigator, quietly tracking my journey, college classes, part-time shifts, lonely apartment dinners, in order to document my struggle, dignity, and worth. Hiring a PI in a family dispute like this isn't unusual. Grandparents seeking legal standing often use investigators to gather evidence of neglect or exclusion. And when biological connections are in question, adoption detectives dig deep into personal histories, uncovering falsified records, buried truths, and hidden documents. The photographs and reports Margaret later gave me were the proof. Candid shots of me walking to work in early morning light. A receipt from a late-night campus library purchase. Notes from the PI charting my apartment's modest rent and my quiet routine. She had watched me, not to control me, but to know me, to build a case that I was hers. Eleanor had also intervened legally. She'd threatened to take custody, not to take me from my parents, but to restore my place in the family. Her threats forced David's hand. He backed away from the adoption plot. But Susan's thirst for control persisted, canceling visits, moving us hundreds of miles apart, and reinforcing the adoption lie at every turn. All the while, I'd internalized that isolation as truth: Susan's "you're not one of us" sentiment, David's awkward avoidance, and the silent bubble of exclusion they nurtured. They insisted I was adopted, and I believed them. Until Eleanor's letter shattered the world they built. This was more than greed, it was an orchestrated campaign of erasure. The PI's file and Eleanor's letter quantified that campaign. But they also quantified something else: my grandmother's unwavering determination to fight for me. In that revelation, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The scholarship I applied for alone. The scholarships I didn't get. The nights of instant coffee and dried noodles. It all made sense. They didn't just withhold love, they attempted to rewrite me. Eleanor refused to let them succeed. And even in silence, she created a record, one that couldn't be ignored. While I hustled through community college classes, worked nights at the auto parts store, and lived on ramen and instant coffee, my half-siblings and parents were spending like there was no tomorrow, assuming grandma's inheritance was already theirs. According to Margaret, the numbers were staggering. My father dropped $65,000 on a brand new truck. My mother turned the kitchen into a high-end showpiece, a $40,000 remodel. My brother Logan even scored a $30,000 boat for his birthday. All of it lived on credit, all presuming that the money from Eleanor would come shortly. I'd been scrimping on textbooks and mealworm cereal. They were leasing SUVs, upgrading appliances, and financing luxuries, all in the shadow of a fortune they already believed was theirs. It reminded me of a Reddit finance story where a family member, expecting family money, pushed mom into buying $1 million home that ended up spiraling into tensions and suspicions. When an inheritance is treated like empty promise, it distorts decisions and family values. The picture Margaret laid out was brutal in its clarity. I pictured Logan grinning beside that boat, Ashley stepping into yet another new car. Meanwhile, I was tightening my belt, working overtime just to cover my rent. My grandmother knew all of this. That was part of why she ensured the inheritance landed in my hands, and not theirs. They had gambled recklessly on money that wasn't theirs, confident in a promise that didn't exist. She'd followed my life from afar. Whereas they were plotting vacations and upgrades. She saw me hold the door for strangers at the store, pause in the parking lot to count the coins in my pocket before buying lunch. Her private investigator recorded every small victory and every sacrifice. This chapter was about the contrast, my survival, fueled by dignity and hard work, versus their reckless expectation, driven by entitlement. And as I sat there, digesting it all, I began to understand that the inheritance wasn't just financial, it was moral. It was the culmination of a lifetime of observance, of why she chose me, not them. Margaret Stevens leaned forward, her face steady. You inherited everything, she said. My chest tightened. Could it really be true? She opened the file again. Your siblings, Logan and Ashley, each received $5,000. Your parents received nothing. My mind went numb. They had spent lavishly, $65,000 on a truck, $40,000 on a kitchen overhaul, $30,000 on a boat, believing grandma's money was assured. Now all of it had been based on a lie. I could almost see their faces, the smug confidence fading to shock, guilt, anger. The facade broke. Margaret explained that the will had been meticulously drawn, with no room for ambiguity. My grandmother had clearly documented her intent, reinforced by evaluations of her mental competency. Any attempt to contest would be costly, but ultimately fruitless. Inheritance law allows disinheritance when explicitly stated, and she had stated it clearly, legally, and lovingly. My relatives' lavish spending wasn't evidence of entitlement, it was presumption. I leaned back, absorbing the enormity. The inheritance wasn't just money or property, it was my grandmother's final statement of truth. A testament to her unwavering belief in me. When people assume inherited wealth is automatic, they risk building extravagant futures on shaky ground. Studies show that inadequate communication about estate plans often leads to conflict, as expectations fail to align with reality. In that polished office, I understood full well, my family had assumed. Now the assumption, so brazenly displayed through bills and big-ticket spending, crashed under the weight of truth. The sun leaned low by the time Margaret and I pulled up to the familiar driveway. Inside their remodeled living room, the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and new upholstery, symbols of lives rebuilt on false promises. My heart thudded as we stepped through the front door. Susan, poised and perfect, greeted us with a thin smile. My father looked drained, guarded. Logan and Ashley hovered nearby, their curiosity piqued. I'm here about Grandma Eleanor's will, Susan began, voice tight. I exhaled and stepped forward. Margaret carried the folder. I'm Margaret Stevens, her attorney, she announced calmly. Silence fell. I saw the moment recognition flicker in their eyes, and fear. Well? David stammered. I held up the letter. This says I'm not adopted. That Jennifer was my real mother. I laid the sealed letter and legal documents on the coffee table. Logan and Ashley's faces drained of color. What about us? Ashley whispered, voice shaky. Margaret opened the file. Logan and Ashley each received $5,000. David and Susan received nothing. Everything else belongs to Austin. Shock rippled through the room. Susan's lips trembled. David's face lost color. Susan's voice sharpened. We'll contest the will. Margaret's expression remained serene. That's your choice. But contests fail more often than not. Courts generally uphold clear, properly executed wills. Without strong evidence, like fraud, undue influence, or lack of mental capacity, it's unlikely to succeed. She continued, over 96% of will challenges are rejected. Even claims of undue influence demand clear, convincing proof, and mental competency evaluations confirmed Eleanor's capacity. Susan's jaw clenched. She was confused. She shot back. Margaret shook her head. Not according to her doctors. She was clear-minded when she wrote this. Documents showing 2 psychiatric evaluations were passed across the table. The room exploded in emotion. My parents sputtered denials, my siblings sobbed, and Susan raged. But facts, like anchor stones, held firm. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. The letter and legal documents come from her, the executor, and witnesses. You spent money assuming it was yours. You gambled and lost. I paused, giving them a last look. But I'm grateful. I have the home, the future, and the truth. Margaret collected her folder. Without a backward glance, I followed her. Out. The confrontation was over, clear, definitive, and final. I lingered with my hand on the doorknob, the Sunday evening sunset casting long shadows across the polished floor. Inside, Susan stood, her voice trembling as she called out through the doorway, "Austin, please. We made mistakes. Can't you forgive us?" I looked back, studying the face of the woman who had, for 21 years, made me feel invisible in my own family. Her plea echoed in the suddenly quiet room, but there was no warmth in her expression, only desperation. I realized I was not looking at a mother seeking reconciliation, but at the woman who had systematically convinced me I didn't belong. "We tried," she whispered. I paused, heart heavy. Then I remembered Grandma Eleanor's words, her unwavering belief in me, her last act to ensure I had a life free of lies. The will was ironclad. Over 96% of will contests fail in the U.S. due to clear testamentary intent and proper execution. Probate courts nearly always uphold a sound will. Eleanor had not only written her wishes clearly, she had fortified them with psychiatric evaluations and legal witnesses, leaving no room for doubt or contest. I exhaled slowly, the weight lifting. I wasn't being cruel, I was honoring the person who stood for me when my own family wouldn't. "I'm sorry," I said quietly to Susan. "I truly am." Then, I stepped out. Margaret followed, her steady presence a reminder that this chapter was closed. Outside, the evening air felt like a rebirth. Grandma's plan had been fulfilled. My departure wasn't abandonment, it was assertion of truth, identity, and belonging. As Margaret drove away, I held on to something far more precious than forgiveness, certainty that I was finally free to live as myself, unshadowed by their denial. Months later, I stood on the porch of Eleanor's old house, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a lush garden she once lovingly tended. The air smelled of earth and fresh blooms, and for the first time in my life, it felt like it was genuinely mine. Moving in was a process. I followed advice from relocation experts, starting with non-emotional spaces, packing a front door bag of essentials, and keeping routine steady to face the upheaval calmly. Inside, I found treasured remnants of my mother, photos of me as a toddler cradled in Jennifer's arms, letters my grandmother had written but never mailed, birthday cards unopened. Her handwriting overflowed with love and regret. These artifacts felt like breadcrumbs leading back to a life I'd almost forgotten. I carved out a corner of the living room as a home office and completed my degree in business administration. It wasn't just a diploma, it was a rescue mission. Rescuing hope and purpose. With each semester, I gained analytical thinking, leadership, and communication skills. Classes in finance, marketing, and strategy gave me practical tools, and fresh belief in my future. Graduation day, I processed more than just credits, I processed a new identity. My grandmother's resources and my own resilience combined to propel me forward. I launched a career in community nonprofit work, fueled by the empathy I'd developed through hardship. I wanted to give back, to help kids who knew that gnawing feeling of being unwanted, of hungering for truth. Each morning, I wandered through Eleanor's garden, letters in hand. Here, among her roses and perennials, I felt her guidance. It was as if she was saying, "You belong. You were always meant to be here." Settling into the house, finishing school, building a career, it was more than a fresh start. It was a reclamation. I wasn't just building a home, I was building the life my grandmother believed I deserved. Truth had freed me. Now, possibility did too, with his inheritance. Invested wisely, Austin launched a nonprofit for kids aging out of foster care, children who understand what it's like to be unwanted. He never spoke to his father again, occasional holiday cards from Susan ended up trashed. In his grandmother's garden, he finally felt truly loved. The money helped transform his life, but it was the truth that proved priceless. A new beginning. Months had passed since the confrontation, and Austin had settled into Eleanor's house, a 4-bedroom home with a lush garden. He discovered treasured photos of his mother, letters Eleanor never sent, and tangible proof of her love. These artifacts became his anchor, grounding him in the reality of his heritage and the love that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. The nonprofit with the inheritance invested wisely, Austin launched a nonprofit dedicated to supporting youth aging out of foster care. Each year, over 15,000 youth in the U.S. exit foster care without a permanent family, facing challenges such as homelessness, unemployment, and limited educational opportunities. His organization aimed to provide these young adults with the resources and support they needed to build stable, fulfilling lives. Personal growth. Austin completed a degree in business administration, equipping him with the skills to manage and expand his nonprofit effectively. He also began therapy, addressing the trauma of his past and learning to trust again. In Eleanor's garden, he found solace, tending to the plants and reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. A legacy of love. Though his relationship with his father remained severed, Austin found peace in the knowledge that he was living authentically. The truth of his heritage, once hidden, had set him free. It was not the inheritance that had transformed his life, it was the love and truth that had always been there, waiting to be embraced.